or we should. Welcome to Books and Beer Live with me, Luke Richardson, and Amy Waeschle as well. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. It's wonderful to see you from the other side of the world, the Pacific coast, isn't it? So it's early in the morning for you, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
I like how it's slightly dark in the room that you're filming this, and it does. If you told me it was the middle of the night and the sun had yet to rise, I'd probably believe you.
It's a really stormy, rainy day here in the Northwest, so that's probably why.
Right. But it's not early for you. You've been up several hours already, you told me just a moment ago.
Yeah, I get up really early in the morning to write. I have two young children, and the only way I can get anything done is when they're asleep. So I get up about 4:30, and I write till they have to get up for school. Yeah.
Gosh, I haven't been up that early for a long time. I did find a couple of years ago I went sort of left my job to do writing, and I do other sort of freelance work, but I'm a bit of a man of my own time scale, and it's a blessing in one sense but not in another, because I used to be able to do what you were talking there, getting up at 4. I don't think I ever did 4:30. I think 5:30, 5 o'clock was about my earliest. But now I'm like, no, I do it whenever I wake up. It's a sort of blessing in it, I think, as well.
Yeah. It's definitely it was like a survival skill when my kids were really little, and they truly do take a ton of energy when they're small. They take a lot of creative energy, and so that was the kind of how I survived being able to write when they were little. Now they're older; they're 11 and 14, and so they're a little bit more autonomous, and they can do a lot on their own. And I can get some writing done during the day, but it just isn't as good a quality as when the house is quiet. So
Yeah.
it's become a habit now. I don't know that I'll ever be able to break it. I used to be a night owl when I was growing up. I would read super late at night, and but now by about 9, I'm done. I'm crashed out.
There was always something sort of quite poetic and creative I used to like about getting up before the sun and sitting there, and you'd see the sky lightning through the curtains and whatever. You can tell how much writing I was doing. I was just sort of staring out the window watching. But yeah, there was something nice about that. I remember, that I used to like, and it can feel quite different and creative and that sort of thing. So you mentioned there you've been doing this for several years. Sort of when did you bring out your first book, or what was the process of the last few years for you?
I've been writing my whole life, but I didn't really take it seriously until probably about maybe 5 years ago. I had a story I really wanted to tell, and it was I'm a surfer and an outdoors person, so I had a story I wanted to bring surfing into a story, kind of like make it a thriller. And so I wrote my first book, Going Over the Falls, and that came out in 2017. And it was a book I'd written off and on, one of those, like, take it out of the drawer, edit it, I don't like it, put it back.
Yeah.
And then, work another job and then maybe get some extra time. And so it was one of those, like, passion projects that took probably 3 or 4 years to really pull it together. And then I published that in 2017. And it's a standalone book, and it's still, I love the story so much. It's probably more like a women's fiction / domestic thriller kind of combo. And I really loved it. But I found that I really wanted to write a mystery series. So I kind of began researching kind of how that would work, because I love mysteries. I've always loved them, even when I was a little kid. Are my favorite books. So the Going Over the Falls definitely kind of opened the floodgates. And then I was like, okay, now I really want to make this like a career. I really want to be able to give this all the attention that I want. So that was when that started.
That first book is opening the floodgates is a good sort of term, isn't it? I remember thinking, if I've done this, I can write about anything. And there's a real sort of empowering moment, isn't there? Yeah. Then you realise, shortly followed that thought for me was like, yeah, but it did take quite a long time. And was quite a lot of work to get to that point,
Yeah, but then you get like one person or a handful of people that reach out and say, "Oh, God, I love that. When is your next book, or what are you going to do next?" And then that gives you a little bit more wind in your sails. So yeah, it's like a little snowball, snowball, and it starts rolling and it starts rolling and it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and pretty soon you're rolling. That's what happened with me.
Exactly. I am going to have to pause there because it is books and beer, and I'm dying to open this one. I said to Amy before I wasn't expecting her to have a beer because it is just turned 9 o'clock where she is in the morning, and you wouldn't get much writing done after
It's a little early for beer for me. At five,
Yeah.
though, I'm in, definitely.
No, maybe next time we'll have to schedule, but then it would be the middle of the night for me. It would be a little bit late. But anyway, there we. Maybe hopefully one day we'll meet in person and be able to share a beer.
That was great. I would love that.
Yeah, this is an LC Mo, which is a local beer, a local brewery to me here in Nottingham, the Castle Rock Brewery. Yeah, so I'm going to enjoy this whilst we're talking.
Yeah, as you should.
Yeah,
I've already had my coffee. It's like almost lunchtime for me.
I suppose it is if you get up at 4 a.m. Yeah, I bet, as you say, you're but after 6 o'clock, talking to you is like, one word answers. I imagine in the evening.
Yeah, I definitely get monosyllabic.
Yeah.
It gets hard to put the
That's
kids to bed sometimes as I'm falling asleep when I'm reading to them. So
Yeah. So I've always loved the idea of writing mysteries. And I think my books do there's some sort of mystery element to them, although really they sort of thrillers, I think. Although that it's difficult to sort of categorize anything, I think, in that sort of sense. How much do you sort of follow the traditional traits of a mystery? All of the characters that are involved have got to be given in the first act, or you've got to have the sort of same reveal as you might have in a Poirot or one of the other Christie sort of books, or do you sort of deviate from them slightly? Are you very sort of by the book, or are you a bit more creative with the genre?
That's a really good question. Let's see. I there are certain elements of the mystery genre that are staples you have to have. You have to have, I write mostly murder mysteries. So, right, someone has to die.
Yeah.
You have to have a protagonist that people can relate to. In my case, my series that I just completed last year, my main character is actually not a detective. She's a geologist. And so she's kind of a scientist who ends up getting pulled into these different mysteries and help solve them with the help of an FBI agent. So she kind of pairs up with somebody else. And so you have to have those procedural pieces in a mystery, the evidence and the false leads and the twist. And so, for sure, those are the things that I always have in my books. And that's the thing that my readers love. They love that twist at the end. My newest book, the McDawson book that is in the Deadly Secret set,
yes,
that we're part of, excuse me, has a twist at the end that it's so fun because I'm writing it thinking like, God, I hope this is twisty enough. And then people will write in and say, oh my gosh, I didn't see that twist coming. I'm so great. So those are things that the mystery readers absolutely have to have. And those are really fun to create. In terms of like putting all the elements in the first act, I don't think I do that. I take a lot of what I write. I get inspired from a lot of the really popular mystery writers that have a female protagonist, like Lena Lee is one that I really love, and Kendra Elliott. And they actually both have mysteries that are set in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live. And so a lot of the style that I write kind of parallels a little bit about like what they do, where just you have those steps of solving the mystery that have to do with, interviews and evidence and also the character's backstory that might influence which way they will go with the story and kind of how they'll get tricked into maybe following the wrong lead, and then how those things get revealed and how they get put in danger and have to kind of fight their way out. Because I always want my female protagonists to be super badass and super awesome, but also a little bit vulnerable and kind of have to face their own fears as well. And there's a theme through all of my books that is very closely tied to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. But actually, I think that's the recipe for a great book you've talked about there. There's got to be some extrinsic danger, but there's also some kind of internal conflict as well, isn't there? And I feel like there are those sorts of James Bond characters that can brush it all off and get up without a scratch. But they're not the sort of books I enjoy the most. I think there's always the ones where the character faces some kind of challenge greater than that I think makes the book really sort of gripping.
I agree, and I really prefer those stories where you have some kind of internal journey that the character is experiencing, and whether that's the whole series long, it takes them, all 5 books or all 10 books or whatever, or part of that is being solved in each of those books, or it's 2 or 3 books. But I really do enjoy just having a character who can look inside and to like face their own challenges and be vulnerable maybe with someone else or in a situation and learn from that and get confidence from that. Because I think that's something that we all in our lives, we all are doing or trying to do, is to kind of have those experiences where we're taking a risk and it's paying off.
Yeah, I mean, ours may not be as life and death, or hopefully aren't as life and death as the characters that you write or I write. But I think you're absolutely correct in that they're comparable directly to something that a reader would experience, whatever that might be. And I think that makes it gripping, and that makes it sort of, what's the word, engaging in some way, doesn't it? Let's pause for a moment and just jump over to the comments to say hello to people, because I can see a few people have come in already. Alison's joining us. Hi, Alison. Lovely to see you. And Ray is in here as well. Hello, Ray. He told me off for getting your name wrong last week. So I said to Amy earlier, how do I pronounce it? And she said, Waeschle. It rhymes with Nestle. And I'm just thinking, yes. Okay. I'm saying that over and over in my mind now.
Yeah,
so
that can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Moore's joining us. Fantastic. Hi, Steve.
Hi,
How are you
Steve.
doing? And he's saying that 5 a.m. is a lie-in for him. Not for me.
Yeah.
And Alison says, very nice beer to the Elsie Mo. It is. I'm enjoying it a lot. Ray says, Amy's first book experience sounds like Lolo Page's launch, Snowballs. I don't know Lolo Page's launch, but I think it's a common sort of experience with that first book, isn't it, of writers, of sort of the confidence, building up the confidence to do it, to make it, and learning the process as you're creating that thing, and then sort of looking back at it and going, oh, did I really write that?
Yeah.
For the years going on. And John says, good afternoon. John's actually writing a book of his own that he told me on email. So maybe one day he'll be joining you, Amy, in the hot seat on this show when he's through the process of that, or working on the process of that. So you talk then sort of about those thrilling twists that your books are laced with, or maybe even trying to sort of out-twist the last one to take your, to increase the tension on your readers. Do you have that twist in mind from the get-go, or does that occur to you as you're writing the book?
It's both.
Okay.
I certainly have a twist in mind, usually about a character. Like sometimes what I love to do is I love to present characters that maybe you think they're one type of character, maybe they look like they're a bad guy, but in the end, they're the one that's going to save or offer that lending hand that sort of helps get to the resolution, or someone who we think is a good character, and in the end he or she isn't, and that's something that I sometimes will start out knowing. Like I did that with Cassidy Kincaid. I had a character introduced in the second book, and then the third book it becomes real that he's really a bad guy, and that's really fun. And then sometimes it doesn't, I don't know, like in the Meg Dawson book that I'm just about to publish, the one that's in the Deadly Secret set, the ending was kind of wrapped up, but I just needed one more something in there. It just wasn't quite done for me. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I realized that I had the perfect answer. I had a character who I'd been kind of in the background all along, and we don't really know much about him, her. It was fun to be able to just crank that twist right at the end. And it was kind of in an unsuspecting place too. I don't think readers were expecting that to happen. So it was like 2 surprises at once. It was great. It was fun. And that, as a writer, when you have that creative process that just comes out of the blue, I mean, that is the reason why we're such junkies, because that creative process, you feel like you're tapping into some greater creative force that's using you as a medium, and it's glorious. So yeah, that's really fun when that happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's fantastic.
I know exactly what you mean, and you sort of feel you ignore this at your peril, don't you?
Right.
It comes at you and like a train in the night, and you're just like, okay, I'm not in charge of this story anymore. That's what I've got to do.
It's a little bit like that, yeah.
No, I'm interested about this because I've read. I'm reading the Meg Dawson book at the moment that's in the Deadly Secrets box set, which we'll talk about shortly. And it's hard to tell. I always find with a box set though how far you are through the book because the reader at the bottom of the Kindle doesn't tell you. But that actually adds to the tension because you never know if this chapter's going to be the last one because it just says to the end of chapter. I'm like, okay, this last.
Is this the end?
Yeah, is this the end? I'm not sure. And so I don't know how far I am, but but it's a great book, and already there's a few twists and turns that have sort of grabbed my attention this way and that. So, but that's the first book in a new series for you.
Yeah.
Nice. What made you think, okay, I'm gonna start a new series. I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction. I know it's still got the sort of mystery elements, but it's a different protagonist and a different set of characters.
Right. So last year I wrapped up my Cassidy Kincaid series, the one that features the geologist. And there's
So you said no, that's it. No more of that.
Well, I could only put Cassidy in so much danger. By the time we got, because there's a mystery arc that goes through the whole series. And I felt the need that it was time for Cassidy to get to the end of that and to finally be safe. And to have her and the other character who she's kind of working with kind of have their story come to, it was just like a good way to pull it all together.
Yeah.
And also when I started that series, I really wasn't sure where it was going to go. And that's really dangerous because, you get to book 3 and you're like, oh no, I needed this thing to happen in book 1, but you can't do that because book 1's already published. So I decided it was a really great place to end the Cassidy series, which with Cassidy's Crusade, which is the final book in the series. But I knew that, okay, going forward, I really wanted to plan another series with a protagonist that, again, I don't have a ton of experience with law enforcement. And so I wanted and I'm a former journalist, so I wanted to have her be an investigative journalist as my main character. And so I wanted that to be the kind of the driving force for the series. And I also wanted the ability to plan because I hadn't done very good planning when I first started. It all worked out okay, but it was a lot of work and it was harder. And I wanted just to be able to plan, 5 books and certainly have a series arc again, but be able to plan it better so that it wasn't so stressful and the writing was a little bit more fun. So that was why I started a new series, was because I wanted to also be able to space the books out a little bit better, do a better job with planning, just because that makes my life easier. It makes the writing more fun. And I think that the books obviously will come out better. I had to rewrite my first book a couple of times before I got it going. And I won't have to do that this time. I'll be able to just write, and I'll be able to write faster, and it'll be better experience for the reader. So yeah.
It's so you've got sort of 5 books in some form of plan. The arcs, what's going to happen in those books, and so you've managed to put all those sorts of strands, tying them together, and this sort of thing.
Well, we'll see. I haven't done the other ones yet, but I'm actually starting to write book 2. Probably next week is when I'll start. So I have planned a little outline for each book, and I have mystery arc for the series lined out. We'll see how it goes as I write. I like to leave a little bit of things unplanned because again, that creative process is so fun, and when I can tap into it, then I want to make space for that. But I have the outline of the book, and I have to. In the next book, Meg moves to a different city. She moves back to Seattle, so I have a new set of characters to design, and then than the ones I had in book 1. So that'll be kind of fun too, and I'll be able to really settle into the series in this book because the rest of the series will be set in Seattle. So it's the same characters and the same setting and background, and that will be happening. So that part I'll be able to really sink my teeth into that's sort of the settings part of the book.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Will there be any crossover between the first series and this one? Any characters doing cameos that you featured?
Actually, that's a really great question. I wouldn't have thought anybody would ask that. But
brilliant.
Really.
Are you able to say? If you don't want to, if it's top secret, then please tell me to cut out.
There is an FBI agent in the Cassidy series who Cassidy she becomes a geologist at the University of Washington here in Seattle. So in the end of the book, at the end of the series, they end up settling in Seattle. So he's on the FBI. He's an FBI agent on the Seattle team. So yeah, he'll be showing up.
Great.
But I have an interview with an FBI agent who's on the forensics team in the Seattle department of the FBI next week to get some details about some really great forensic stuff that would be really perfect for this next book to pull that in. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
So how have you? So you just emailed the FBI and said, "Can I chat with someone from the forensics department, please?" Or is it like a friend contact that you know through some network?
I think that you can't. I think there is a channel to do that. But I'm fortunate that I grew up in this area, and I have you have enough of a network. You start reaching out, and someone knows someone.
Someone knows someone, yeah.
Yeah, through a connection. Family friend, stepdad, I have a woman kind of in my network who works on the forensics team for the Seattle FBI and field office. And so she has agreed to help me, but I actually had to, unfortunately, you can't just start asking questions. They would have a process where they have to review what your requests are, and they have to make sure they can share. And I appreciate that for sure, because I would not want them to feel like they were sharing more than they should, or I wouldn't want to compromise their operations in any way. So I have to kind of go through a formal process of being vetted, I think, and then being able to sort of step back and think through what they are able to share and what. So
wow.
I'm looking forward to that. Mm-hmm.
That must be the nice thing, though, about not directly writing police and FBI and these sorts of things. Whilst, of course, your main character has contact with those people, they are outside of that world. So all the procedural stuff you can see from arm's length, I suppose. I find I know a lot of authors do write sort of police procedurals, having had no experience in the police, but it must be a real minefield of research and cross-checking and making sure everything stacks up, because people would notice. There are a lot of people who have had experience in that world, and they probably would notice.
Right, and you want it to be authentic. I mean, that's one of your, as an author, being authentic and being able to share the correct procedure is really, at least to me, it's really important. So yeah, for sure. And actually in the last book of my Cassidy series, I have a point of view written from the FBI agent's perspective. And so I did have to have a pretty deep understanding of how the FBI investigates crimes. And I actually have a former FBI agent, another person in my network, that helped me a lot. He's retired now, and so he's able to probably share a lot more than he would. Of course, doesn't share anything about active investigation or anything that could compromise anything that they're working on. But having him as a resource it was fantastic, because not only do I connect with a real person who's living the life that I'm writing about, but also learning, because I love to learn, learning from him how crimes are solved and the foundations of all those pieces that form your case, and how all those things work, and also how it's different from FBI versus, say, a local police department, because they do things differently in terms of prosecuting. And so learning all that was fascinating. And I definitely, in the future, I would like to write probably after the Meg Dawson series, I will write an FBI character featured as the point of view in a series, because what I learned was just so fascinating, and it would be really fun to be able to do that. The hard part is that I don't know how to fire a gun. I've never tried, so that's something
places you can go and learn that, particularly in America. Yeah, we don't have them over here, but you can.
I'll have to add that to my list of things I need to learn about before I can write.
Yeah, I think that's part of the thing if you're writing about. When I was in Budapest last time, I went to a shooting range. We don't have them. You can do rifle shooting in the UK, but not sort of machine guns and stuff. And they're fired in Desert Eagle and an AK-47 and these sorts of things, which was terrifying and great fun in equal measure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I fortunately have another friend in my network. She's a state patroller, which here is the highway patrol. That's what we call them in Washington State and the States. So they work on the highways, but she's offered to when all the COVID restrictions kind of get a little bit more manageable. We're going to go to the firing range and she's going to help me. So I'm excited. I mean, it's scary, really. Guns are really scary, but being with someone who's so confident, uses one every day, you know, probably has a whole arsenal of them in their garage.
But you got around that, didn't you, in your you got around that in the Meg Dawson one by her having like a fear. Not fear is the wrong word, but like an aversion to guns because of some historical thing that had happened to her. Is that conscious that you wanted her to be more creative than just having a gun and waving it around? You know, you wanted her to be more sort of be more sort of creative with using her mind and that sort of thing, I suppose.
Yeah, that was intentional. I wanted her to have I wanted her to have a lot of experience in law enforcement because her dad's a cop and her older brother is a cop, and I wanted her to grow up in that lifestyle because that is going to drive her curiosity and her interest in law enforcement. Just when she gets to the academy, she can't actually follow through with all of the requirements because she has this traumatic experience as a younger person with guns. And so in a way, it really forces her to find another way to sort of drive her passion for solving mysteries or solving crimes. And that's why she becomes a journalist. And it actually is a really fun conflict to play with when she's investigating and tracking down leads, is that, you know, she's not armed and she knows she can't be. And so she has to, it's like, again, it's a fun way for me to play with that internal conflict that she's fighting all the time, as she's also basically trying to be a cop. But you mentioned something earlier about how, like, you know, as an investigative journalist, she's not bound to a lot of those rules that, you know, law enforcement has in terms of going to prosecute the case. And so in a way it's very freeing because she doesn't have to worry about, you know, bagging evidence or the proper procedure of like getting a warrant and, you know, making sure that this thing that they captured was on the warrant, like a lot of that stuff. I mean, being a law enforcement, you know, personnel, it's just so challenging, you know, because you're trying to solve a case and yet you have like all these little details that if you don't get them right, you know, the case gets thrown out and the bad guy walks free. So Meg doesn't have to worry about that. I mean, certainly she could be breaking the law. Like she does do some breaking and entering in the story. But, you know, she gets away with it. And unfortunately for her, you know, she's not a cop. So it wouldn't be used against her in terms of prosecuting the case. So,
totally. And you see a lot of police work. I can imagine a lot of police work, having never been a police person. But you can imagine a lot of it is really boring investigative stuff, you know, like watching the CCTV on a car park for a particular car to come in, or phoning all of the people in a particular street to ask if they saw something, or whatever it might be, you know, days and days of just something that's not very interesting, you know. But you're right, you know, with Meg and in your series, you can skip those bits and just have her climbing through someone's window looking for something, or whatever it might be, you know.
Right, you know, or follow someone, or so she's able to kind of get around the law a little bit, and that's also what makes it fun for her to have try to find a cop or a detective who she can share with, because there's things that she can find out that are value to the police, and there's things probably that they know that are of value to her. So it gives her some leverage too, which, I mean, an investigative journalist actually solving a crime alone would be it'd be really difficult because there's just pieces of information that she would not have access to, like an autopsy, unless it's made public, and it wouldn't be made public unless the case is solved. So if it's not the case, she wouldn't have access to that. But there's critical information from an autopsy or other things that she wouldn't have. So that's something that's been really fun too, is to use that as a source of power for her in terms of negotiating and sort of finding out more information that will help her, you know, solve the crime.
Yeah. In this first book, she has a sort of the crime is quite personal to her. Is that something that, I mean that's obviously your way into it, isn't it? But that must be a challenge with the subsequent books, to give her that inroad, to give her that emotional like connection with the crime? Because you could, you struggle to have, it was someone in book 1 and then it's a sister in book 2 and then you think, how unlucky is this person?
One by one, the whole family gets taken out.
Yeah. That's it.
That would be really hard. I would not be able to do that.
But I mean, how does she? How creative have you had to be to sort of pull her into this world of deceit and death and lies that because she's got less of an obligation than a police officer would have, hasn't she? As a journalist, how have you pulled her into that sort of world? And was that a challenge to do, if you don't want to share exactly how?
Well, I mean, the first book, obviously it's the beginning of a series, so I wanted it to be as compelling as it could be. And I also, because Meg she's an outsider. She leaves Seattle, she goes to college, and when she flunks out of the police academy, she goes to college in California and gets a job at the LA Times as a journalist, and it's dog eat dog. So she's looking for any angle she can get in order to impress her editor, who she's constantly in hot water with him because she's impulsive and doesn't really listen to rules very well. And so she kind of lands this case kind of by accident. And even though she gets pulled off of the case and gets warned by the police to stop meddling, this is personal for her because it's a friend who's been murdered. And so that was really fun to have it be a connection like that. And also it allowed me to be able to share parts of the victim's background that he shared with Meg, like times that they shared together and parts of his personality, which then plays into the plot too. So that was really fun to be able to do that. In future books, right, I can't do that with every book, so it would be a little bit different. And that the book 2, the murder that takes place is going to remind her of the murder of a case that she's still working from when she was a high schooler. So it's going to still have that personal connection because it will bring up all these old memories of a friend that she lost and a case that was never solved, that she's still working kind of as a cold case project. So it'll be able to bring in the series arc, which is going to begin really pretty strongly. And you get a hint of it in book 1, but it's going to really start in book 2. And so that will connect, I think, through that story. And then the third book, I don't know that it's going to have a direct connection to the series arc, but hopefully by then readers will love it so much that, they'll be hooked.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they just, you do get sort of invested in a character as well. And you mentioned earlier you were a journalist yourself, and so have sort of borrowed some of her frustrations from your time. Was that at a newspaper or a magazine? Where did you work? And
so, firstly, it was the one that I really worked as like an actual reporter was my high school experience, my high school newspaper, which was really fun. We get to do all of our stuff at the local newspaper office, and it really did feel like a
nice job. Yeah.
And I loved that. It was fun. But when in my later years, I also worked as a travel writer, and I wrote for the Bellingham Herald, and I wrote travel stories for them. And even though I wasn't like a full-time staff, it's still, I really enjoy the process, and I love sharing travel stories. Obviously, it's so fun to provide just like a little bit of entertainment. There's nothing, dark or mysterious about it. But just knowing that, you're connecting with people about something that's really fun and enjoyable and a little escape is really fun. So I really like that. I don't think I was ever the kind of person who could be a journalist, though. The pace is so fast, having to come up with stories every day, and be always on like that. Was a little, I think it's a little too fast for me. But I do like a deadline. Actually, I work really way better under a deadline than I do.
Oh, really? So I will come back to that in a moment. I studied journalism at uni. My undergrad degree is in journalism, and quickly decided I didn't want to do it as a job because of what you've described. And also I found that because it was so frantic, the pace, the stories were just boring. Like there was no investigation. There was none of the, like I grew up reading the books of like war journalists and really interested investigative journalists thinking, yes, this is amazing. I'm going to do this, And then when I found essentially it was just rewriting press releases about a new garden centre that's opening or a new charity event, I was like, no, this is rubbish,
Yeah, you need to be like a wartime, journalist, but you're like on an assignment to write a book, like where you can really get into the meat of the story and really investigate like all the parts. I mean, that would be something like that would be fascinating, I think.
Like the thing that Meg is doing in your books, I suppose, but
yeah.
Let's have a quick look in the comments, and then I will talk about deadlines and your sort of writing process, because a few people have asked comments. Maybe you'll answer this. Maybe you've answered this already. Alison's asked, which of the characters in your books do you relate to most and why?
Oh, well, all the good ones.
Well, the bad ones are part of you too. They came out of your out of your mind.
If there's any bad guys that I relate to a little bit. There's one character in the Cassidy series who he's a biker, and he comes off, maybe he's not as like as somebody who's going to be an ally, and that changes in a really fun way, and I definitely relate to him because of that. But
nice.
My characters that I relate to, I mean, I definitely relate to Cassidy for sure, and I relate to Meg, and both of those characters are, kind of on a, they're both impulsive, and they're both don't like rules, and determined to do whatever it takes, and those are qualities I
including getting up at 4:30 in the morning.
Finding a source, like I really needed to find a source in the county district in Northern California for the final book in the Cassidy series. I really needed somebody, and I was determined to find that right person, and I did, and it was fantastic. I learned so much about local law enforcement and like all the details I needed for the book. So yeah, things like that, I'm definitely determined.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes across in your sort of schedules as well. Another one from Alison: if you could meet and interview any of your characters, what would you ask them?
Oh, wow.
Ooh, it's got to be one of the bad ones, hasn't it? Like, why are you such an idiot? Like, what?
Why are you so evil? It's not good.
Yeah, come on, mate.
Let's see. God, it's such a good question. I want to really answer.
It's a really good question. Alison always likes to do this, throwing curveballs.
Yeah, that's so good. Let's see. I probably would want to ask about the future, like with Meg. Like, is she ever going to get over her fear of guns? Is she ever going to be able to learn? Because after this first book, she gets betrayed in a big way. I would want to ask, is she ever going to learn to trust someone again? So that'd probably be what I'd ask.
Like it. That's a great question. Steve says he recently had the pleasure of joining you and some other authors for a few beers in your hometown, and you had a great time. It's a stunning part of the world. I know. Yeah, he shared a lot of his photos from his couple of months there, and it sounds like a beautiful place. Yeah.
It was just nice to see other authors in person after not only COVID makes it hard, but authors are generally a little reclusive and are hesitant to leave their desk and are sometimes quite shy. And so being able to just go out and talk about like what we were working on, and having like another person understand what that's like. And one of the persons in our group was just as an aside. He said, "Oh, and I turned in my book to my editor today," and I was like, "What? Really? Like, that's so awesome! Like, oh, yay!" Like you never get that reaction from your family. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah, as if it's every day. As if you do.
It's like just part of your writing schedule. It's like, but no, it's a huge deal. And so being able to celebrate all those like little milestones with people that they're in your world, they know how big of a deal that is.
Yeah.
It was just really gratifying. So I really appreciated it.
I still feel like when explaining what I do to civilians, we'll call them civilians.
Civilians?
Yeah. I still feel a little bit sort of awkward and anxious that they're going to go, "Oh, what? Like Dan Brown? Or what? Oh, like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King." I'd be like, "Yeah, a bit. It's a little bit in that we both write books." That's sort of where the comparison ends.
Process-wise, perhaps maybe they write in a similar way, but their publishing schedule and their dollar amounts probably are a little different.
I know. Yeah, but it is nice to meet people and be able to talk. And people on this group know, people that are watching this know what we talk about. They know a bit behind the scenes, and they know the sort of they know what we do. But it is nice to be able to do that and not have to explain those sort of basic things, how, just like editors and the process and ideas and all these sorts of,
Yeah, for sure. Or just sometimes the struggle, that we go through, having somebody who understands it's nice. So yeah.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And another guy who understands the struggle, Kevin here. So he was on the show a little while ago. He says it has been alleged that press releases about garden centres are way more interesting than any of my books. That's not true, mate. Your books are great.
I think press releases about anything are pretty dry. What you're talking about. You have somebody write something a little more exciting.
That's it. And you were talking about how supportive the author community is. Steve Moore has just demonstrated that by saying, no, watching paint dry is more interesting than your books.
Yeah. Not really.
Ray says, and then this is the last of the comments. He says, if you were to branch out from mystery series books, would you write about your outdoor adventures as freestanding novels?
Well, I did write a memoir. It was my very first book and was traditionally published. That was back in 2009. It's called Chasing Waves, and it's a surf travel memoir. And at the time, back then, there weren't a lot of women surfers. So it was kind of like a groundbreaking story in its time, because they're just, every time I went surfing, at least in my area, I was the only girl in the water. And so it was kind of like a story about how to become a surfer, because I didn't surf until I was 30, and I learned, and I loved it. I kind of became obsessed with it, and then I wanted to travel. And so we spent a couple of years doing a lot of that, traveling and surfing. And as I became a better surfer, more skilled, and so I did write, and I loved it. It was such a fun story to write. I mean, who doesn't like talking about themselves and their travels, right? So
that's basically my dream job. Yeah, talking about myself and travel.
Like it, if I was an extreme skier or I had another extreme sport, I certainly would write another memoir. But I don't think I have another one in me. But I do put a lot of outdoorsy stuff in my novels. Like Cassidy's a surfer, and there's several. Rescuing Reeve has a lot of surfing in it because it's set in Costa Rica, and she's on a quest to find her missing stepbrother, who is also a surfer. And so she has to go through the surf world in Costa Rica, kind of tracking him down. And so that was really fun to be able to put a lot of my passion for surfing into that book. And there's some surf scenes in the later books too. But I still like to write, travel type stories. I haven't published one in quite a while. I've been focusing on fiction, but I certainly would love to write more stories that have had more of an adventure focus.
That's so. One of the books is set in Costa Rica, you say? Is that?
Yep.
Is that the only one that's not set in your sort of region?
Well, that's a book that's set in Costa Rica. Going Over the Falls is set in Fiji mostly,
nice.
And part of Mexico. So that is another kind of international type story. There's a lot of surfing in that book too. That was my first book, and I really wanted to have that as part of what the characters and what their passion was. So, and it's also another source of kind of tension and intrigue for the plot. But so let's see, in the Cassidy series, several of the books are partly set in San Francisco, which is my other favorite city after Seattle. And I was able to do a lot of really fun research going down to San Francisco to write those scenes. And then let's see, I think it's mainly Seattle and San Francisco. And then there's parts of Mexico, Costa Rica. Yeah. For the
Brilliant. And then these places you visited whilst doing your surf travel, living your surf travel life.
Yeah. Fiji, we went when I was still kind of a beginning surfer, and that was an experience because the waves are really, really powerful there, and I was not really in a very skilled place to be surfing them. But that actually created the idea for the Chasing Waves, that book, the memoir that I wrote. Just realizing, like, wow, this is a big endeavor, and I'm not at the top of I'm not skilled enough to do this, but I wanted to be. So it kind of drove the project.
Oh, it's fascinating. This is what my books involve, a lot of travel, and I love sort of going to a place and sort of, getting that into the story. The camera's wobbling a bit because the cat has just woken up and she's scratching her face just behind the screen quite aggressively. She does this at night though. She'll come and sit on the bed and scratch like this, and the whole, anyway, there we are. But That is such a nice thing to, I think, to weave in a beautiful experience in a place with the sort of story that you're trying to tell there. So I wanted to get back to talk about the sort of deadlines that you set yourself.
Yeah.
How long then does it take you from inception, idea, first word to the end, that draft's done?
Okay, well, before I learned how to plot, it would take me like a really long time. Like going over the files, like I said, it took several years. When I really got serious about publishing it, it probably took me 6 months to get it really wrapped up and edited and ready to go. Now I can, well, it depends. But if I'm really focused and I have the plotting is set up so that I know kind of my waypoints, if you will, in the book,
I like
and
it.
I can write a book in about 45 days.
Wow. So about 6 weeks is that, isn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes it takes 2 months, especially with where we are in the US, where I live. The COVID restrictions are enough that my kids are now being able to go back to school. And so that's kind of, you think that would give me more time to write, but for some reason it's making it harder. So it's probably going to be 60 days for the next little while until things can even out for me. But if I set everything up and correctly with editing, schedule, and all that, putting all your ducks in a row, I can get a book out from when I start to when it's ready to go in about 3.5 months.
That's good going then. So you do, so you plan for about 4 a year, something like that, or a couple, 3 to 4 a year. Good.
Yep.
That's good
Although
stuff.
last year I think I published 7.
Wow.
I write in another genre under a pen name, so I was writing books for that pen name too. So during COVID, I actually had more time to write, like I said. So I was able to write more, and I did, and it was lovely. It was a great escape for me because COVID was really tough, but I know it was tough for you guys too. So it gave me like just more time to devote to my passion, and it was good. So yeah, but
I'm definitely a better writer because of having that 1.5 years out my laptop.
Yeah. I definitely read more books and I wrote more books.
That's it. So that's it. You got to see the positive in these things for sure. Steve says, Luke, a surfer in San Francisco. Sound familiar? Cough, cough, Kayla Stone. The series that Steve and I wrote with our protagonist Kayla Stone. The third one is in San Francisco. Yeah, and she's a bit of a surfer, although I don't know anything about surfing, and I don't know if Steve does. I don't think he does. He's not mentioned it. So we just went on that as just like we just sort of made it up as we went along. I'm sorry to say. We should have asked you, Amy.
We should. Actually.
Now you're going to be my go-to surfing expert for
Although I've never surfed in San Francisco. You wouldn't know that probably from what I write, because I got a lot of help from people I know who surf there, but the surf there is pretty serious. It's pretty intense.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah.
San Francisco itself. There's places you can go along that coastline that aren't so, but people who surf like Ocean Beach, that's right there in San Francisco. It's the heavy duty. It's the real deal.
Oh, I see. Well, maybe. But I mean, she's from Sydney. She's surfs down there as well, so I think she's probably pretty good at it. That's how I envisage it, anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So we're really pleased to be in this anthology with you, Deadly Secrets. That is a fantastic thing to do. Yeah. Tell us about that then. What was because you was no secret, I don't think, that you're the sort of brains and the brawn behind it. What was your thinking behind that? How did that sort of come together as a project? Because it seems to have been brilliant so far.
Well, it was actually inspired by a friend of mine who writes in a different genre, who had done it with authors that he was connected with, and it was a really fun way for him and those authors to come together and do a project. And what's really been great about the Deadly Secrets set is that I wanted a way to share our stories with more readers. I mean, that's, as a writer, like, that is what we live for, is that to know that, we're doing this creative thing and that it's being shared. And it's not about making money. I mean, if it was, we would all quit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's really a focus, at least for me and for most people that I know in this business. It's about sharing. It's about sharing that creative piece that you've devoted this time to. knowing that readers are appreciating it, and just being able to connect and build your community of people who love the kind of stories you write, whether you're writing them or you're all reading them. Like that part doesn't matter. And so connecting with all of you and the other authors that are in the set, I kind of reached out to some of the people that I already knew, that I already kind of had connected with, and that my readers had read their books, and we were kind of aligned that way. And then kind of expanded that network. Hey, do you know somebody who writes kind of the same stuff that we do? Because I wanted all the books to be female protagonist driven, or at least have a strong female character driving part of the story. So maybe they share a POV with a male character, but I wanted that female presence in the book, because that's the kind of stories I love to read. And my readers love that female protagonist lead, that sort of bold, sassy, maybe a little bit impulsive, but kind of gets the job done kind of character. So I wanted to collect all of, a group of us, and have a way to just share what we do, share a piece of our type of writing, and see if it resonates with a greater community. And so it ends up being actually a really simple idea. I mean, pulling it off was a bit of work, but not really, because everybody contributed. I had a long enough deadline for people to turn in their stories on time. I think I had started this project back in March, and I said, everyone get it, done in September. Some people joined later, but just starting the process then, making a way for us to all communicate, sharing ideas. It was fun to collaborate too. And then being able to produce it in a way that is easily just distributed to people who, to your readers, to Steve's readers, to Michelle's readers, having all that and the network of people that we are all connected with. So it was just a way to be able to share with like-minded authors, with like-minded readers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this sort of author and readers community that we're part of, and things like this conversation and the Deadly Secrets anthology and all of this is essentially sharing something creative and something interesting that if it gets a new reader interested in your books, and it will find me some new people to talk to on this show, I think that's a really great thing to sort of be part of. So it's a good one.
Yeah, it's been really fun, and it's been great. Like I've interacted with some of the new readers that have come into my getting my newsletter now because of they've downloaded the set, and it's just fun to connect. Like, I got the collection, and I'm so excited. Or hey, I read your book, or I read Luke's book, or I read Michelle's book, and it's thank you so much for putting this together, for sharing, and so again, that's just so gratifying, is to know that here I am in my cave writing this little creative thing, and that it's in the greater world now, and it's being appreciated. So that just makes me so grateful.
It is a beautiful sort of thing to do, to be able to share those things. And I have posted the link just now while you've been speaking in the comments. So if you're watching this at home, you'll be able to. I don't know why I say at home. It doesn't matter where you're watching this, wherever you're watching it, as long as you're not driving. Don't do this if you're driving. You can click on that, and you can get the anthology. It's fantastic. And it'll be a good addition to your Kindle. It's there until the end of the month, I think, isn't it? So about another week.
Yep. Another weekend and something, 10 days, 11 days.
Yeah, another 10 days, something like that. And something you mentioned there that I'd like to sort of circle back on, actually, is we talked about female protagonists. Now, this box set is all about female protagonists.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that is growing? Because if you look at books of 10 years ago, maybe more, there were less, weren't there? Certainly. It seemed that all the powerful characters were male. And I think that representation has been outdated for a long time. Do you think that this is a growing trend in the sort of writing world to give female characters those powerful leads, or do you think it's something maybe we're just noticing more now in the current time?
Oh, well, I mean, I think there's certainly readers who are looking for that now. Maybe. I also think that, it represents maybe some changes that are going on in our society. 10 years ago, did we have female sheriffs? Did we have a lot of female detectives? And
that's true.
There are more of those now. And I like, and even television, you watch the Bosch show, or you watch Longmire, or some of the other shows that are popular with, the cop procedural, and there's a fair amount of, minority characters and women characters who have, you know, lead positions or lead roles. So maybe this is more of a reflection of like how our society is maybe changing a bit. But I mean, I remember as a kid, like reading, you know, Agatha Christie, and, you know, there are female characters and, you know, in her stories. So maybe it's just something that's become more prevalent. And it's also could be led by some of those bigger authors I was talking about earlier, you know, Kendra Elliott and Melinda Lee and Willow Rose. I mean, they're very popular in the female mystery genre. And their characters are all that, you know, female protagonists. Led stories. So maybe it's just a matter of there's more available, and it's
I think that's an interesting point you raised there, that it is a reflection of life outside of books, you know. But I find it an interesting. I like it. I think it's a great way to. It makes the book more interesting, to twist things and cast people in roles that traditionally in the books of 10 years, 20 years ago, they weren't in that role. And I think that's a good thing, isn't it? And plus the authors like you and I can think about, we can decide, we can make things exactly how we want them to, you know.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's one of the best parts about writing fiction, is that you can create the kind of roles and the kind of characters that you want. You know, the sky's the limit. And so absolutely, it's a great way to try to maybe broaden people's minds a little bit. Like there's a lot of, like, let's say this is a kind of an off example, but my kids read a lot of graphic novels. And they're in that sort of 11, 12, 13, the middle grade type age range with books. And there is a ton of stuff about the gay community and LGBTQ. And it's a huge thing in those books. And it's like, I didn't have that when I was a kid. Like we didn't talk about that stuff, but they're all talking about it. It's in their books. It's in their shows. Because that's what's going on in their world right now, is that there's a change in being able to talk about those kinds of topics and having that an opportunity to bring that into the conversation. And I think that with fiction, it's like that. Like we can make change. We can actually affect how people think about, or maybe give people tools, or they can maybe imagine what it would be like to have a world like that we're creating by what we're talking about in the books, or what the characters are doing or thinking, or how they're changing. And so that starts to feel like really good, you know, that we're able to like reflect the kind of society that we want, whether it's opportunities for characters or it's, you know, resolution for problems that we are facing as a society. I mean, that might be like the best, you know, reward of being a fiction writer.
I love that. I love what you just said. I'll just paraphrase it about writing a thing that reflects the society that you want. I think that's a really, and you sort of bring that into existence through the words that you write there. Yeah. Do you think about the representation of a character in advance? Like, I haven't done this, but I feel like I don't want to say I feel like I should, but you know, I wonder, I write a character and then afterwards I think, oh, could that be interpreted this way? And then I sit there and think, oh, maybe that's, you know what I mean? Maybe I shouldn't have done that, you know, whatever it might be. I can't really think of an example offhand, but
I think what you're saying, well, like how I interpret that, and how I've put a lot of thought into, is that, you know, like with Black Lives Matter, which has been a really, really big movement, and especially in our area in Seattle. And there's been a real drive to, you know, include more characters, I think, in film and television, and obviously in books too. And so there's been like I would love to include more, you know, characters, African American or Asian, or some other form of, you know, ethnic background. But I don't want to mess it up. I mean, like, there's a real, you know, I obviously want to portray, you know, a character that has a culture. I want to portray it in the best way that I can, and the only way to do that is to actually, you know, walk a mile in that character's shoes. And so there's a real conundrum about like how do I do that and have it be authentic. And again, I don't want to do this character wrong. So I think that's another, like, a growing pain. I think that all writers, whether it's TV, film, or books, are faced with. And if there's a writer that does have that kind of background, then that's so fantastic to be able to bring that, to the table and be able to portray that character in an authentic light.
Yeah, but you could say the same about you writing male characters or me writing female characters. Like, we've never been the other gender, and yet we write them, and I think that you write them convincingly. I hope that I do. Like, I suppose you've just got to try it, haven't you? And as you say, engage with people who are within those communities or identify as that, and see.
Yeah, we're just like doing research for, an FBI agent, or research for a like a SWAT team member, or it would be a similar type of research that I would do, or we would, as writers, would do, or would need to do, to create characters that were genuine. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm really conscious of, and I know sort of if you watch films from the 1960s. Every baddie is Russian.
I know.
And that is because of the Cold War. It's because of the fear that people had of communism and all these sorts of things. And you can tie it to historical points. And then you look at the mid 2000s. Every bad person looks a bit Arabic and has a beard. And it's just sort of, and you can tie it to sort of world events. But as a writer, I'm really conscious that I don't want that to be the case. And you said that already, that you've got this biker guy who perhaps, I'm imagining, I've not read the book, looks a bit scary and a bit tough with tattoos and a leather jacket and whatever. But he turns out to be quite a nice guy in the end of the story.
No, he doesn't want to be a nice guy. I didn't.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
But he may develop a connection that ends up being an ally in a way that's unexpected. But no, he is not a nice guy.
Okay.
That's okay. Like, not all good characters need to be nice.
No, that's true. That's true. I like that. That's a good little twist. Yeah. Amy, this conversation has been fascinating. It's just flown as I knew it would.
It has. It's been great talking to you too.
Absolutely. Where can people find you and your books and all of that business? Where's the best place for them to go to find these fascinating books that we've spent the last hour talking about?
Thank you for that. The best place is probably my website, which is my full name, amywaeschle.com.
Okay, amywaeschle.com. That's it. Get over there and see a load of Amy's books. Thank you so much. It's been great. I hope to talk to you again, and hopefully one day we'll share a beer. Either over here in the UK, if you ever make it here. I mean, you've got relatives in Germany, you said.
Yes, I do. So it wouldn't be far.
That's not too far. If you have a stopover in London on the way or whatever, we'll definitely meet up for a British beer on the way at some point. Yeah,
that would be great. And if you're ever in the Northwest, of course.
Absolutely, I hope to be. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again.
It really has, and I'll see you everyone watching next week. I'm looking forward to that. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.